I will call this regular meeting of the Larkspur City Council to order. May we please have the roll call?
Councilmember Way,
Here.
Councilmember Chu,
Here.
Vice Mayor Morrison,
Here.
and Mayor Hilmer.
Here. Would you please rise and join us in our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks for coming this evening. The first item on the agenda this evening is public comment. Are there members of the public that would like to make comments or ask questions on items that are not on the agenda this evening? Yes, ma'am. State your name for the record.
Cindy Winter. Some of you know what I'm going to say, but some don't, so I'm going to say it anyway. This concerns the Transportation Authority of Marin Measure AA, Safe Routes to Schools. Measure AA has 3 new benefits for safe routes to schools. It occurred to me that our local school districts would like to know about them. So last week I presented them to the Larkspur Corte Madera School District Board and to the Kentfield School District Board. Many Larkspur students attend the Kentfield schools, as you well know. One of the new benefits will provide 8 additional crossing guards. In Kentfield, I suggested briefly that it would be nice if one of the new guards could be used at the South Alicio-Bonaire Road intersection by the construction site. The very next day, I began receiving emails from Kentfield, and already now a meeting has been promised in the near future between TAM, which administers safe routes, and our DPW director, in order to discuss whether a crossing guard can be posted there. While I am pleased to have served as a catalyst, I've learned that the world of crossing guards is unique unto itself, and I'm delighted to step back and let the professionals take it on. The other new Safe Routes benefits in TAM's Measure A are, first, an investment category for small safety-related infrastructure projects near schools, and second, a specific budget item for school buses, which have proved very successful in reducing school-related traffic congestion. I have a summary explanation of these 3 items, including where to learn more about them. I will give them to your clerk.
Thank you very much for your comments. Are there other members of the public that would like to make comments on items not on this evening's agenda? Okay. We'll move to the next item on the agenda this evening, which are a presentation from the Marin Municipal Water District, a community partner update. Mr. Charlie Duggan, the Administrative Services Division Manager and Treasurer, is here to talk about infrastructure, water quality, and the environment. Thanks for coming, Charlie.
Thank you for having me. Mayor, members of the council, city manager, thank you. I can dive right in, or we can wait for the slides. Well, the first slide is going to depict the MMWD's mission. One of the reasons we're here tonight is we wanted to come by and talk about the vital role that we feel we play in the community. We know certainly that you do. We feel like we're great partners with the cities that we work with. Give you a little bit of an update on some information about the district and also some specific information about Larkspur and our projects. Of course, we have a 5-member elected board. Larkspur is covered by Larry Russell in District 5. Each one represents one of the 5 geographic areas, the 4-year terms that are staggered. In the upcoming election, I believe 3 of our members, 1 is unopposed and 2 have competition. We like to talk about we do more than water. And we're not really just in the water business. We're in the public health, the public safety, and the quality of life business. Of course, public health goes without saying with delivering water that we can't live without. I once saw a documentary that said that 80% of hospitalizations worldwide would be prevented with access to clean water. 80% worldwide. That was a staggering number to me, especially when so little of the water on the planet is actually potable. 80% of it is salt water, and 90% of the water, fresh water, is underground and hard to access. When we talk about public safety, just talk to your fire chief and about what we do as far as assisting with public safety. When it comes to pressure, flow, all of those things, ISO ratings and insurance ratings for cities, we play a vital part of that. And quality of life, whenever I'm driving down the street and I look up at Mount Tam, I think about not only just that view, but all of the people who use the mountain, whether it's biking, equestrian, hiking, all of those things that it brings to Marin's community. We pride ourselves on excellent service. The water has to flow 24 hours a day when someone wants it. It's there. If there's a main break, we're out there. If there's a small leak, we have to fix it. And it doesn't matter if it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, any other holiday of the year, our crews are out there. We have a operations center that's manned 24 hours a day, so that when someone finds an issue and they call it in, we're dispatching crews immediately. We have a variety of personnel that work for MMWD. We have rangers, welders, chemists, field crews, engineers, biologists, treatment plant operators, customer service personnel. We have accountants. You name it, we employ it. We have 240 employees. When you look at Mount Tam, we have 5 reservoirs around Mount Tam and 2 just to the north of Mount Tam. Those reservoirs can hold a combined 29 billion gallons of water. During the last, I'm told during the last drought, we were the only water district in the state that didn't have to enact mandatory water restrictions. We had voluntary water restrictions, but not mandatory. Part of that is because we manage our storage and that we have about a little over 2 years worth of storage. So it'd have to be pretty significant droughts back to back before we are in any way concerned about the capacity that we have. And then we also get water from the Russian River. 25% of our water, well, really 23% of our water comes from the Russian River. And Sonoma County Water Authority, 2% is recycled water. So how do we get the water to you? So the water falls on Mount Tam, we store it, we treat it, and then we deliver it. And so we have 3 treatment plants. We serve a population of about 190,000 people. The 7 reservoirs collect the water that we're not getting from Sonoma County. So this is just one of our schematics, and it's amazingly complex how our system. Someone about a year ago asked, how is our system different than down south east of LA, where it's basically a desert area? And we have 900 miles of installed pipe. That's not out of the ordinary. We have 128 storage tanks and 95 pump stations. That's out of the ordinary. With the terrain we have here in Marin, we've got to be pumping water up to people in a lot of places and holding it for pressure in other areas, and that makes it a lot more complicated because we have a lot more equipment, and we have to balance all of those pressure zones that are throughout the system. 7 reservoirs, 3 water treatment plants, 1 recycled water treatment plant, and we have 1 water quality laboratory. So we think our water is awesome. How do we back that up? We perform over 120,000 water quality tests per year. We keep our lab pretty busy. We meet or surpass state and local federal standards, and we publish an annual report that shows up on our website that I can get anyone the link to that if they're interested. The value of water is incredibly cheap. When you look at what people are paying for water, our average customer's bill, and again, this is just average, is about $58 a month. $116 is their bill because we bill twice every 2 months. When you look at that, it's about $2 a day for the average customer. Now, we talk about Mount Tam all the time. One of the things that drew me to working for the Water District is because, in a sense, we're running our own state park. We have the 7 reservoirs around it, Lagunitas, Phoenix, Alpine, Bontempi, Kent, Nicasio, and Sulahuli. And Lagunitas was constructed in 1872. Sulahuli was in 1979. And so it's a variety. The largest one is Kent with 32,000 acre-feet of storage. Now around Mount Tam, we have 21,000 acres of land for people to use, enjoy. 93 miles of roads, 59 miles of trails, 9 picnic grounds, and we think we have about 8 million visitors a year. Just briefly before the meeting, I was speaking with the mayor, and we brought up the subject of wildfires that we're very concerned about. We have 1,000 acres of fuel breaks built and maintained there in the watershed. We've invested since 1997 just in the system to help with fire and public safety. We've invested over $100 million since 1997 in fire flow capacity. So meaning bigger pipes to allow more water to go through to protect people's homes and businesses and things like that. We've partnered with Marin County Fire and Fire Safe Marin to promote fire-wise communities. In the last 10 years, we've spent $203 million invested in the system. Some of the big projects we're working on right now, seismically upgrading our filter plants at San Geronimo and Bontempi. We replaced 34 deficient storage tanks, 75 miles of deficient pipe, and recoated 10 storage tanks. And so in some places we actually still have redwood tanks that are, I don't know how many, 50, 60 years old, and they're just really placed on some concrete. So if they start shaking at some time, they could just topple over. I think we're left with about 6 of them that we're still scheduled to replace. In the next 10 years, we plan to spend about $211 million to replace 56 miles of deficient pipe, recoat 7 storage tanks, continue upgrading our water treatment plants. We had a major slides, I think it was 7 major slides in 2017 due to the rain in January, and so we're still working on shoring up that property. But it does take a lot. As you know, infrastructure is quite expensive. In Larkspur, in the last 10 years, we've invested $5.8 million to maintain infrastructure where we replaced about 20,200 linear feet of deficient pipe. One of our recent projects was on Elm and Riviera Circle. One of the things we pride ourselves with, I used to be a city manager before coming here, and so we had water and public works in our city, and one day we sat down with the directors of both of those and we said, why aren't you coordinating when you do your pipe replacement projects? Because what happened was, and nothing drives a public works director more crazy, is to tear up their road a year after they've resurfaced it. And so what we do here is we make sure that we know what the resurfacing schedule is. We work very closely with public works directors, and we make sure that if you're going to tear up a road, that we come in, and if we have to replace pipe, we replace it so you don't have to deal with patches and things like that from us if it's a newly resurfaced road. With that, I just want to say that we deliver more than water. We're committed to exceptional service, 24/7, 365. We have a very complex system, but we want to make sure that when someone turns the faucet, they don't have to worry about it, that the water flows. And that in addition to being really careful about making sure our water is the highest quality and that it's there always, we want to make sure that Mount Tam is there always for everyone. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and I really appreciate your time tonight.
Questions from the council for Charlie? Larry?
Thank you for coming tonight. You know, one of the things a couple of years ago when we did have a water shortage, you talked about volunteer cutbacks. There was criticism about how it cost people more money because fixed costs weren't being covered. So has there been any consideration of changing the formula so that it is more heavily weighted on the fixed cost and less on the variable cost, so you can cover things like infrastructure improvements and things that are ancillary to it, like your wildland urban interface management, things like that?
Yes, I think in 2015, they instituted the watershed fee for the first time, and that was a fixed cost to go towards some of the fire protection work that we're doing. And there was also a shift in the service fees at that time to try to capture some more of the fixed costs because of that very reason. Whether someone turns on the water or not, it's not that we're just supplying people with water. It's the service of collecting the water, treating it, storing it, and then delivering it to people that is the expense. And there's only a small portion of that goes into the electricity and the chemicals and the things that we have to do that work into the variable rate. We'll continue to watch that, and that is something that the board will look at the next time we have to consider any kind of rate changes. That'll go into our cost of service analysis. And so we want to strike that balance of trying to make sure that the heavier water users pay more for the amount that they're using, but also capturing that fixed cost.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine?
Hi, I have two questions. The first is, last Wednesday I attended a debate of the 5 candidates who are running for the MMWD districts, and it was a debate with the Marin Women's Political Action Committee, but the 2 questions came out about the purchase of Potter Valley. I think I got that right. And none of the candidates were clear on what that meant, but there's something about MMWD purchasing land in Sonoma County?
I actually have no knowledge of that, but I can check on that and get back to you.
Most of the candidates didn't either, so that's why I
Right.
was wondering. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I've only actually been there a year and a half, and so that has not come up in
Okay.
any of the conversations with the general manager or at any of the board meetings.
Yeah, there wasn't an opportunity to clarify any of that because they were
Okay.
really timed in. I believe it's Potter Valley. It's in an area that's in Sonoma County. It's not in Marin County. Because I know you do get 25% from the Russian River still?
That's correct, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
My last question is, you're talking about infrastructure improvements for the pipes and the pumps and the function. What about the billing and computerized system? And I'll give you an example. I had a broken irrigation pipe, unbeknownst to me, and opened a bill for almost $3,000. And when I had someone from MMWD come to the house, he told me, we don't know what's happening half the time because we have 1970s computers. My question is, I don't know the accuracy of that, and I may have just been an employee, but part of what my issue was how accurate is the meter reading for the consumer and whether your computer's infrastructure is keeping up with what the demands are of your system.
Right. Well, first I'll address, I'm pretty sure all of our computers are newer than 1970s.
Well, he probably was born after 1970, so that was probably his estimate. But.
Right. We have a pretty decent system. We use SAP as our backbone system for all of our enterprise stuff. We only read meters once every 2 months.
That was one of the questions, is if there's technologies that allow the meter to be read more frequently for the consumer so that they have more control of what their usage is.
We actually started a pilot project last year where we installed about 1,200 AMI meters, automated meter infrastructure technology. The ones that we were testing connect to the cellular telephone network, and they actually send 1 message a day, a text message, but it includes meter reads every 15 minutes during that whole day. And so we are testing that technology. There are some issues with, we've allowed people to opt out of the project if they wanted because there are some concerns about electronic frequency. However, it's a text message, so if they have a cell phone, they actually experience more electronic frequencies than this meter ever would. we're looking into that now. To replace 60,000 meters would be quite expensive, measured anywhere. I've seen estimates from $15 to $20 million. So that's one of the things where we're trying to move in that direction, but we want to make sure that we weigh all of the costs and make sure that the purchase is worthwhile for all
Right.
of our customers. Now, we may be doing something where we allow people to opt into the project too, outside of the test area. So if you're interested and want to let me know, I can look into that, because we could install one at your house.
Is that installed at the street level where the meter is, or is that installed at the house level?
It's right at the meter.
At the meter? Okay.
Yes, in fact, I went out and helped install them, and for 98% of them, it's just a disc that is, it just looks like a little disc on top of the meter cover, and that works just fine. If that doesn't work, then we might have to put something next to it with a small antenna, but it's not near the house at all.
Okay, thank you.
Other council member questions? Are there members of the public that would like to ask questions or make comments on this presentation? Thanks a lot, Charlie.
Thank you for your time tonight.
The next item on this evening's agenda is the consideration for approval of the consent calendar. Are there items on the consent calendar that council members would wish to pull for further discussion? Members of the public wanting to pull items for discussion from the consent calendar? I'll consider a motion on the consent calendar from a council member.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
There's been a motion and a second for approval of the consent calendar. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the city manager's oral report. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, council members, just a few items for you this evening. First, want to put in a plug for folks who haven't done so to sign up for Nixle alerts. They should visit alertmarin.com where they can sign up. It redirects to the sheriff's page if you type .com. I brought it up because we were all noticing today, those of us who signed up got a nice message reminding us it's a red flag warning this evening, and those are the types of messages now being put out by Nixle in addition to the more urgent notices when something's happening that we need to respond to in a more critical fashion as a community. So strongly encourage folks to go sign up, and if they just Google Alert Marin, they'll land somewhere that's appropriate. Second, another plug is for the Friends of the Library on October 13th from noon to 4 p.m. in this room. They're going to be sponsoring a road show at the library. They've actually arranged for several appraisers to come in, and folks are invited for a $25 donation to have various items appraised. And I understand that they decided it had to be something you could yourself bring into the building. So please don't bring anything and then ask for somebody to help you unload it from a vehicle and bring it up here. So anything you can carry in and get upstairs, the appraisers will take a look at. And then lastly, I think at our last meeting sort of laid out what I thought was going to be the upcoming schedule for the council meetings and the topics, including I think we'd said at this meeting we'd be doing more on the preferential parking system. And of course, the world's fluid and things change, and so we didn't have that item this evening because it turns out today is a school holiday, and the school wants to participate and make sure that parents and families are aware of the discussion, and didn't feel it would be a good idea to have it on a school holiday. So we've rescheduled that, and it's affecting some of our thinking for your upcoming schedule items. So we'll be putting out our tentative plan soon for the public of what we think the next few meetings will cover. I can say that we have told the council as staff, we don't think it would make sense to hold a meeting the day before Thanksgiving, which is that Wednesday is actually slated to be one of your council meetings. So we'll go dark that day. If we think we need to have a second council meeting in November, we'll make that call sometime in October and poll the council about a special meeting date. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Are there questions from council members for for the city manager regarding his oral report. All right, we'll move on with the public, or with council members' oral reports and comments. Any this evening? I do. Vice Mayor Morrison.
Okay. On the dais, I have Safe Routes to School newsletter. It's the most recent one, and we are really focusing on making walking and biking intriguing and a necessity. So, 2 points, you avoid the stress of waiting in the car line, et cetera. We also, which is exciting, we have road maps. Each city has a suggested route map for students to use. So that's really clear and easy process to follow. So we're excited about that new website. So please, when you get a chance, take a look at the Safe Routes to School newsletter. Okay, off to Chamber of Commerce. Lots of events happening. You have one on your dais. I also, let's see. So I'm just going to throw out some dates to everybody. September the 21st is Spirit of Marin Awards. I know that most of you are going to that. That's great. On September the 25th at North Magnolia, we're going to have a ribbon cutting for Gather Wine business. On October the 18th, we have in here at City Hall, the Larkspur Business Citizen of the Year. Her name is Veronica Ruves, and she owns Hello Gorgeous in North Magnolia. What's really exciting also, we're going to have our first, and here's invitations, it's just a draft. You've got one there, Larry. It's called the North Magnolia Wreath Walk, happening on November the 10th from 1 to 4. It's our first one. We're very excited about it. We have over 13 merchants that would like to join. What we're going to do is they're going to decorate their own businesses and decorate their own wreaths, and it's going to be a wreath contest. So that's happening on November the 10th. We're going to have free holiday beverages, free face painting and magic shows, and bouncy house and carolers. So we're excited about this event. So hopefully you're all able to come on November the 10th. Last but not least, on December the 6th, we have a holiday mixer at Bon Air Shopping Center from 5 to 7. And then also, in the 2018, the Larkspur Wine Stroll was a huge success. We were 10% over from last year, from 2017. So we had 543 people attend. So we're very pleased with that. And we're going to next year extend the block to Ruli's and to Folios and add more wineries there. Okay, thank you.
Fantastic job. All right. Councilmember Way and then Councilmember Hara.
I'll discuss general plan unless you wanted to. Okay. So just two things. Kevin and I sit on the general plan update committee along with Monty Dignan and Daniel Kunstler. And we had our meeting last night. We hadn't met in a little while. And we covered some pretty interesting topics of community character, neighborhood boundaries and jurisdictions. There was a big discussion about Native American and tribal artifacts and things that need to be put into our general plan and some changes that have been infected in state law since we did the plan last time. And then a conversation about signages and of the entry points to the city. So I think it was, Cindy attended to talk about some issues, but other than that, there weren't other members of the community there. But I think we had a really robust discussion about how those things can be updated within the plan. I'd like to commend how well the staff is working on this. I think Neil is very well organized in it. Shannon is there to offer assistance at the same time. And then Leonard, what's his first name? Charles Leonard, who's the consultant, has also, I think, been a very effective and organized at letting the council and the other members of this group know about it. Anything else about that, you think? No, that's pretty good. Okay. And then last, I attended the DC3 meeting with the Disaster Citizen Corps Council on Thursday, and I won't go into big detail because I'll have to give a presentation to the MCCMC. But one thing that was very instructive in it was Fire Chief Jason Weber gave a lengthy report about the lessons learned in the North Bay fires from last year and the final report that he actually presented to the Board of Supervisors last week and then to this group. There are a lot of point-by-point things that need to be looked at by the electeds and the councils and within the county of of Marin, and we'll be bringing this first off to the ad hoc committee that I co-chair with Sashi McEntee. And Jason Weber will actually be speaking to our group in October about that. But I just want to put it out there so that we'll be talking more about the specific suggestions and recommendations that are in that plan for what cities and city councils need to adopt. So, thanks.
Councilmember Hara.
Well, first of all, I want to apologize for being a minute late this evening. As the only member of the City Council that lives north of Corp-Madera Creek, I'm still having challenges figuring out how to negotiate myself in a timely way across the bridge. So I use that for all my excuses for tardiness these days.
Those little helicopters you did.
In any event. Also, sorry I missed the last City Council meeting. The reason for that was the week of September 4th, and that was a busy week for me in work that I do to help support the mission of MCE Clean Energy. That week started out on September 4th with a series of meetings that I was invited to attend along with MCE staff and members of the California Public Utilities Commission staff. Excuse me. Mostly to express the views of MCE and the Cal Community Choice Aggregation CCA community, expressing concerns over proposals that are being floated now within the CPUC to make significant adjustments to the the power charge and indifference adjustment charge, or the PC yes, I guess that's what it is. Power Charge Indifference Adjustment Charge, the PCIA. I've talked about this before in these meetings. This is a charge that is assessed to all customers of CCA entities, including MCE, with the intent of compensating the utilities for investments that they made in the past for power supply that they don't need because customers have departed. It's called departing load from their customer base and gone to CCAs like MCE, Clean Energy. That's been a feature of the way in which rates are determined within these organizations since their inception. The expectation was, when I first came on the board 5 years ago, was that that would be a diminishing charge over time because it related to power supply contracts and other investments that were made in the past and would essentially wind up over time. That hasn't happened. In fact, it's gone up dramatically. One of the points that we made to CPUC staff on September 4th was that we had a 75% increase in the PCIA 2 years ago, followed by a 100% increase the following year. And now, with additional adjustments that are being proposed by the CPUC staff, there could be another 25% increase. That's important because this PCIA is a major part of the overall cost of providing electricity to MCE customers. And at some point, unless something is done about the PCIA, it's going to render MCE and other CCA entities across the state of California non-competitive. And that's very troublesome because predictions recently have been that in the next few years, if MCE and other CCAs are allowed to thrive, they could account for 75% of the total retail electricity market in the state of California, which is quite dramatic. So this is actually a very difficult struggle. I'm very pleased that MCE staff has invited me to participate in these discussions with the CPUC. It could be that we are headed to a real kind of blunt confrontation with the CPUC, depending on what they do with these upcoming decisions, which will probably come out later on this month. On a lighter MCE note, and this is the real reason why I was unable to attend the last City Council meeting, the Cal CCA organization, which is essentially a trade association comprised of CCA entities across the state of California, had their annual conference at Asilomar in Monterey. And again, I was very pleased to be invited to attend that and did attend. There's a lot of focus on the PCIA, but also other aspects of the CCA movement. I was the only elected as a board member for MCE that attended the conference, but there were electeds from CCAs, representing CCAs in Sonoma County, Southern California, all across the state. So it was a real good opportunity for us to interact with other agencies that are engaged in the same mission. So I was very pleased to be there, but unfortunately was, as a result, unable to attend the last city council meeting. And then the last thing, since Catherine mentioned the general plan update, on September 13th, Ann and I joined Dan Schwartz to our ongoing efforts on the 2050 plan update. That's been kind of a start and stop process, but I think we're kind of back on track with that, and looking forward to making progress. I think we had a very good meeting and had some good interaction with our city manager on that, and look forward to making good progress in the development of that plan update. That's it.
Thank you for your reports. I'll just share one fact. Today at the Smart Board meeting, the Smart Board accepted $500,000 from the state of California to start a high-level study of rail service between Novato and Suisun City and the Caltrain corridor. I thought that was a very interesting idea. Other reports this evening? All right, we'll move to public hearings. We have one this evening, which is Ordinance 1030, amending various sections of the Larkspur Municipal Code. May we have a staff report, please?
Okay, good evening, Mayor and council members. This past year, the city manager has worked with myself and the other department heads to complete a thorough review of every section of the municipal code. Before you today is 550 pages of administrative and non-controversial changes designed to eliminate outdated language, correct code references, and improve language consistency. For example, do we call Julian Skinner the Director of Public Works or the Public Works Director? During this process, staff also created a list of code sections that require more substantive review. The list of 5 code sections before you in your staff report will be brought to City Council at future meetings. That's my report, and if you have questions on any of the changes, I'll be happy to answer them along with Sky and Dan.
Are there questions of council members of the staff report? Councilmember Haroff?
No questions, but just a comment. By going through all of that with the patience that is required to maneuver through all of the details and catch things like Julian's title, you're doing the Lord's work. So thank you very much.
Are there questions of the staff from the council members? Are there members of the public that would like to ask questions or make comments on this agenda item this evening? It's a public hearing. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for discussion and
Jamie,
action.
Jamie, I think this is one of the days when you're glad we have electronic record, because that was 558 pages or something that I decided also not to print. You're probably happy you didn't have to print 5 packets of that, too. So will you just, these changes will be brought to the city council in these code sections, those 5 code sections. Is that because there's a more elaborate need to discuss that, or is there new rules that are coming out about those 5 specific ones?
We concluded with the relevant department heads that there are policy questions involved with the issues. Most of the sections that have been highlighted, there's inconsistencies or lack of clarity, or in a couple of cases, the staff would like to have a policy discussion with you. So those weren't appropriate to put in the omnibus bill.
Yeah, there's a lot of,
ordinance.
particularly the trees and heritage trees, there's a lot of new conversation about that. So I'm pleased that we pulled that aside, so thank you.
Other council member discussion on this item? Councilmember Chu?
Yeah, city manager and I started a very short thread regarding something that Chief Schertz and I had kind of found in the municipal code about the distance that you enforce on narrow roads. You had mentioned that there was a specific circumstance or something like that would need additional discussion about. How would that work?
So what Councilmember Chu is referring to is the code discusses that there should be 12 feet, I believe, in our code as the proper width.
Well, the code has 10.
Sorry, the code has 10. We typically have enforced 12 because the police kind of were leaning on what's in the other communities, they police, which is 12.
This is for a single travel lane.
Just on any street considered narrow.
Yeah. The issue is that we didn't feel that belonged, it should be edited in the omnibus bill. We need more time to look at it because I think we're headed down a path with some of our narrow streets, particularly our concern about our emergency responders being able to get through, that we may have to go neighborhood by neighborhood and have discussions about one side of the street being parking and one side of the street being prohibited. It's a more involved discussion, and so we didn't address the inconsistency here. Our police department's aware of the inconsistency. We really, mostly with that particular code section, it's a discussion with the folks about the need to make sure we can get through. But this has led to a bigger conversation. Several of you I know live in neighborhoods with fairly narrow streets, and it's not a simple thing to say you all get to park on one side of the street, not on the other. We need to have a discussion with folks about the impact of that on the way they live within their neighborhood. But I think that day is coming because you can imagine if we just left the code section the way it was, we could easily end up where we're having to wind through and may not even be able to necessarily fit a fire truck between vehicles that are parking on both sides. So that's one that's not necessarily immediately coming to you because we need to make some decisions as an enforcement team about how we should go about this.
Okay, thank you.
Other council member discussion on this item? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll be happy to. I love my motions. I'll make to make a motion to pass ordinance number 1030. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Larkspur amending various sections of the Larkspur Municipal Code.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nice job, staff.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very
I
much.
really want to thank and acknowledge the city clerk, Jamie Curlis. She was the lead. She was nice enough to say I worked on it. I read all these things with her, which was enlightening. She's the one who stuck with all the department heads to make sure they turned in their refinements. So.
Thank you, Jamie. Great job. We'll move to our business items this evening. We have one. A project update and consideration of a resolution amending the project plans for the Bon Air Bridge Replacement Project. Capital Improvement Project 2004-011. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of council, members of the public. I guess I need to make sure I get my title right? Public Works Director, Julian Skinner. So tonight we have an update on the Bon Air Bridge project, just a general update on construction, how it's going so far. And then we're also going to propose a plan revision for you. If you recall, before public projects go out to bid, we bring the plans and specifications and working details before the council for them to adopt those plans before we go out to bid. So we did that for this project, and as a result of a change on a neighboring project, we're proposing a change on this project for consistency. And so we're bringing that back before you to revise the amended plans. And so there's the agenda for tonight. Just briefly talk about the project update, and then we'll go into the plan revision, talk about the history, what's been done to date regarding that issue, talk a little bit about the through lanes on Magnolia, the slip lanes, and then we'll wrap up with the recommendation for tonight. So the project update, earlier this year you awarded a construction contract to the low bidder, that's Golden State Bridge. They're out of Benicia. The contract itself, the whole project, includes just over 4 years of allotted work days that they have to complete the project. And as we've discussed before, a lot of that time frame, the long duration of the project, is owing to some of the environmental constraints at the site, as well as the community's desire to keep the bridge open during construction. The bid award amount was just over, well, it's $26.7 million. And Golden State started work in May of this year. That was their first day on site. And so here's an overview shot sometime back in July. We are looking kind of west. The main road that you see in the middle of the photograph, there is Bon Air Road, and then Magnolia is in the background. So the contractor started at the west end of the project, making the modifications to the Bon Air and Magnolia intersection, and then paved over the median in Bon Air so that he could then shift traffic over to the south side of Bon Air, which he has now done. So there's K-rail or concrete railing down the middle of Bon Air. Contractor is basically using the north half of Bon Air Road as his staging yard, and then has the south side of Bon Air Road available for construction. And the reason he's done it this way is that the project always contemplated doing the north side of the bridge first and the south side second. So he's set up on the north side, and traffic is moving on the south side. And then that work was done, as I said, he started in May and then through July. As I mentioned, some of the environmental constraints, the contractor was not allowed to get into the water to actually start doing bridge work until we had a few things cleared up with the environmental permits. One of them is we have to do a ridgeway rail, used to be called a clapper rail survey every year to make sure there's no nesting birds. And so we needed to wait for both the federal and the state agencies to sign off on the surveys that we did. Once that was complete in July, then the contractor started working on the north side of the bridge and on the temporary trestle. And so this is a look at the South Alicio Bon Air Road intersection from above. And so the two arrows here are pointing to the first two major items of work on the bridge. One is removal of the railing. So they removed the railing on the north side of the bridge, and ultimately, as part of this first phase, they'll remove up to 10 feet of the bridge on the north side. And then the other item, the lower arrow points to the trestle. So a trestle is a temporary bridge that they're building in the creek that they will then walk a crane onto for doing the major construction on the bridge. So here's a more recent overhead photo. This is from last Thursday, I believe. So again, we're kind of looking southward down Corte Madera Creek. The existing bridge is in the background. And the trestle is the structure spanning the creek in the foreground. You can see probably just over a third of a way across the trestle from the left to the right. That's the crane sitting there. And so if any of you drove by or walked by and saw this, basically they started building the trestle from the east side to the west side. They build enough of the trestle. They're putting piles down in the creek. Then they walk the crane out on the trestle, and they put the next piles in, and then they keep walking the crane out. And so the trestle now is the whole way across the creek, and the railing demolition is complete. So the railing is completely gone from the north side. They have protective concrete barriers up there to separate the active traffic on the south side of the existing bridge from the additional demolition they're doing on the north side of the bridge. Some of the next things you'll see here is this is just the main trestle. There will also be little finger trestles, they call them. So at certain locations across this trestle, there will be little mini trestles that will reach out from the main trestle to the existing bridge to let them get closer to where they need to do the work. So that's why, even though the trestle's in, they're still driving temporary piles for the next couple of weeks to build these mini trestles, finger trestles, off the main trestle. So just to clarify the overall process of construction and how we see the sequencing go, this is a kind of a cross-section looking at driving down the bridge as it was before we started. This is what we call the existing condition. So you've got the travel lanes, you've got a sidewalk on the south side, and then a sidewalk separated by a barrier on the north side. So that was the existing condition. One of the first items of work here is to demolish that 10 feet of the north side. That leaves enough room for traffic to keep using the existing bridge. And so as they've demolished that 10 feet, that gives them enough room to build the new north half of the bridge. And then traffic is going to use the south side of the bridge. So the bottom sketch here shows what it will look like in about a year and a half or so when they have the north half built. So for the next year, year and a half, you're going to see all the traffic will stay on that south side, and then you'll see the left side of this photo, the north side of the bridge, start to take shape. Again, they're building the bridge in two halves, starting with the north half. So just going back, so that's what it'll look like in about a year and a half. So then the next thing they'll do is they'll start to demolish the southern side of the bridge. They will have built a trestle on the south side before they do this. So the trestle they're building now on the north side is for the first half of construction. They will similarly build a trestle on the south side for when they work on that side. And then they will flop the traffic over so that the traffic will then use the new north side of the bridge that they've just built. And then they will start to build the south side. And then towards the end of the project, they'll have what's called a closure pour where they bring the two sides of the bridge together. So that's the general process that we'll see over the next 3.5, 4 years. And so we'll be back probably in the spring with another update. And hopefully the area that I'm pointing to here in the blue, you'll see the new portions of the north side of the bridge start to pop up through there over the coming months, and we'll bring you that update at the next significant milestone in construction. So that's it for the project update. So I'm going to move on to a proposed plan revision. So I want to just briefly show the plan as it was adopted by council before we went out to bid, and then we'll talk about what the proposed revision is and go into the background. So the adopted plan has one through lane in each direction on Magnolia. And then coming from Bonaire, it has a left and a right for each direction. And the green arrows here show the vehicle movements, and then the yellow shows the pedestrians. So this was the adopted plan, one through lane in each direction, and then a turn lane, right for northbound, left for southbound, one for each direction coming off of Bonaire. And then signalized pedestrian crossings of both Bonaire and Magnolia. There is no pedestrian crossing of Magnolia on the south side, just the north side. So the proposed, what we're proposing is a revision. What we're asking you to adopt as a revised plan tonight is to change northbound Magnolia to 2 through lanes. So here's the plan you just saw, and I'm going to bring in the 2 arrows here that show what the revision would be. The adopted plan includes northbound on Magnolia. As you get to the intersection, you would have 1 through lane and 1 right turn lane. That's the adopted plan. What we're proposing here as a revision is to change that dedicated right turn lane to a combination through lane and right turn lane. So in effect, you've got 2 through lanes at that point. That would then match what we have north of this intersection, where we would also have 2 northbound lanes on Magnolia. The other thing this does is the existing plan, because we were losing a lane, we had room to put buffered bike lanes in here. So a bike lane and then a striped buffer between the vehicle lanes and the bike lanes. We lose the room to put the buffer in when we add this through lane. We'll still have the bike lanes, they just won't have that painted buffer. So the background of why are we proposing this change? So this stems from the mitigation projects. As you recall, there were a lot of permits required for the Bonaire Bridge, and there were 5 mitigation projects that were triggered by the resource agencies. One of them was for stormwater enhancement on Magnolia. The project, as it was envisioned, would have removed some impervious surfaces from Magnolia between Bonaire and Skylark or Dartmouth, equivalent of about 11,000 square feet. And so the city had proposed to remove a travel lane in each direction. As you recall, Magnolia, both north and south of this site, is only 1 lane in each direction, so that's what the proposal was at the time. Was to remove one of those lanes. And so when we developed the plans for the Bonaire Bridge, this intersection of Bonaire and Magnolia was designed to accommodate that 1 lane in each direction. And so as you see here, the green arrows that are highlighted with the orange around them reflect the plans as they were adopted to match that 1 lane in each direction, as had been envisioned to match the Magnolia stormwater project. We did 2 sets of traffic studies for that to show what the resulting delay would be at that intersection due to the changes. And they showed about a 9-second delay during the peak for northbound and less than that for southbound. Northbound was the controlling delay direction. So in probably the first day I started working here, we started to receive some phone calls from the public because we had just completed that year's paving project, and we had paved a section of Magnolia where the lane reduction was proposed, and we had only paved the 1 lane. And so we had some concerned residents that expressed a need to talk about that lane reduction and how it would affect the corridor. And so we had a public workshop in July to talk about the proposed lane reduction, and then we came back to City Council in September and discussed doing a follow-up traffic study to analyze the impacts. And then we came back in January at a council meeting and discussed the results of the 2 traffic studies. And through the public interaction we had that night at the meeting and council direction, it was determined that we would keep 2 through lanes on Magnolia between Bon Air and Dartmouth. So the stormwater enhancement project went away, and we said we would find other ways to treat that stormwater as part of the mitigation projects, and we would retain the 2 lanes. So now what we're looking to do is we have an adopted plan for the Bon Air Bridge that only accommodates 1 through lane on Magnolia. And so the adopted plan that we're asking for revision for tonight is the plan for that intersection. We're asking that you approve a change that accommodates the 2nd northbound lane on Magnolia. And that's shown by the red arrows here, as I mentioned before, changing that dedicated right lane northbound to a combination through and right turn lane, and then north of the intersection you would be back to 2 through lanes. And again, it would eliminate the buffered bike lanes. I also want to point out here that southbound, this is not a plan change, but the southbound, we will keep the 2 lanes all the way up to the intersection, and then as you get to the intersection, that 2nd through lane turns into a left turn lane. It's referred to as a trap lane. So it does have the 2 through lanes all the way to the intersection, and then the 2nd through lane is dropped at the intersection as it turns into a left turn lane. But that is not a plan change. That's already on the approved plans. The only change from what's on the approved plans is changing the northbound the northbound right turn to a through right, and then north of the intersection to the 2 throughs. So when we had this conversation back in January and we talked about the corridor and the reduction from 2 lanes to 1 lane, a few questions arose about the slip lanes and how much involvement do the slip lanes have in the delay at the intersection. And if we went with a change or we had 1 lane or 2 lane, what does that mean with the slip lanes? Can we have them, or do they get eliminated, or are they being driven by the lanes? So we did look into that, and we've determined that, as shown on the adopted plans, we can keep the new intersection configuration that eliminates the slip lanes. And so I'm going to have a few slides here that talk about why staff's recommending that we keep with the adopted plan that proposes to eliminate the slip lanes. And so what are slip lanes? And so this is the adopted plan here with the red arrow showing the revision. The slip lanes would be in the 2 areas that are shown here by the red hatching. In the adopted plan, they're not slip lanes anymore, they're enlarged islands. And so this shows kind of what the pre-project existing, but it's not existing today, so the pre-project condition. I say slip lanes, so what they are free right turns that allow traffic to bypass a traffic signal. So as you're approaching a traffic signal and you want to make a right turn, typically they let you go behind a pork chop island and then bypass the red light. Sometimes they're yield controlled and sometimes not. In this location here, the pork chop islands are highlighted in the blue triangles. The green areas are what we're referring to as the slip lanes, and 1 on each side. So there's, before the project, there was a slip lane from northbound Magnolia to eastbound Bon Air. And then there was also one from westbound Bon Air to northbound Magnolia. In both of these locations, there is an uncontrolled crosswalk across both of these slip lanes. And so uncontrolled means that there's no signal, there's no stop sign, there's no reason for a driver to stop there other than if there's a pedestrian in the crosswalk. So they're called uncontrolled crosswalks, as opposed to where you have a traffic signal and you have the walking person or the hand, or at a stop sign where cars have to stop anyway. It's referred to as a controlled crosswalk. So why slip lanes? Why were they there in the first place, and why did people install them? Well, they became popular in the 60s and 70s as a means of increasing intersection efficiency. So obviously, if a car can turn right without having to go to an intersection and stop at a red light and wait, but can instead bypass the signal, go behind the pork chop, it's more efficient for that vehicle. And so it allows a higher speed right turn and can improve the efficiency of a signal. So that's why they became popular and why they started popping up in various locations. The disadvantage of slip lanes is that they introduce, as I mentioned before, this vehicle and pedestrian conflict at an uncontrolled location. So while you have these little pork chops that do provide some pedestrian refuge, a place where a pedestrian can step out of the traffic, for instance, if you look at the green person on here who would be walking up or down Magnolia that wants to cross Bon Air, they actually have 3 separate crosswalks under the slip lane configuration to get across. 2 of those are uncontrolled. They have to cross 2 of the slip lanes, and then there's the signal section in the middle with a double-headed arrow where they cross. So essentially here they're traversing 3 crosswalks, 2 of which are uncontrolled. The other thing, if we go back and look at the advantages about how it can improve an intersections function, that is somewhat negated at this particular intersection, and I'll highlight a few reasons why. So the red arrows here show the area where through traffic would stop at a limit line. The yellow arrow shows where a vehicle could slip by the intersection and not have to go through the signal and proceed onto the other street. And so what I've highlighted here in the blue circles are reasons why these slip lanes are not very efficient as they were. So in order to be a slip lane and to really have an advantage for either one of the cars in either one of these yellow arrows, they would want to proceed through here and then keep going on a through lane on the next street. Well, in both of these slip lane locations, the driver that makes its way through bypasses the signal and then goes through the slip lane is immediately, with limited exception, then going to want to merge into the next lane. So if you're traveling on northbound Magnolia and you take the slip lane to proceed along Bon Air Road, the slip lane leads you into a trap lane that basically forces you to turn into the medical offices. If you want to keep going straight on Bon Air, you would have to merge into the next lane. Similarly, if you're coming along Bon Air and you're slipping onto northbound Magnolia, if you actually take that slip lane, it leads you right onto the bus pad. So you would have to merge into one of the through lanes on Magnolia. So what we've witnessed when the slip lanes were there, when this issue came up a year ago, is a lot of the vehicles that come up to this intersection to use the slip are not effectively using it as a slip lane. Because they cannot proceed through and get to where they want to. They're trying to get one lane over, and so they wait here and they yield anyway until the lane they want to get into frees up. So this is just kind of a blow-up that shows that condition. I've shown the arrows here as red because typically they would stop and wait here. The blue circle shows where that slip leads to. In one case, it's a trap lane that doesn't allow you to proceed. In the other case, it leads you to the bus pad. So in both of those locations, if you go through the slip, you're really trying to merge as soon as you can into that next lane. And a lot of people don't proceed straight and merge. They wait there until they can get into the lane they want to. And so in essence, you're losing the advantage of the slip. They're just waiting at that location to get into the lane that they want to. There is a slight advantage, even though because of the lane configuration, people aren't slipping through these lanes. There is a slight advantage to that slip lane for northbound Magnolia at this location, and that is that it provides additional storage. And so as you approach the intersection, you would have the 2 through lanes before, and then you have a right turn pocket for people who want to use the slip. So there is some advantage traffic-wise, volume-wise, to this intersection due to that additional right turn pocket where cars can get out of the way of the through lane. And so that equates to about a 2-second delay advantage versus not having the slip lane there at all. And a 2-second difference in the function of that intersection doesn't change it from one level of service to the other. It's still a level of service B. Now these are, we analyzed the peak impacts here when we're looking at this intersection. So really for westbound Bon Air to Magnolia, there's no advantage to having that slip lane there or not. If we went back to the proposed plan, you would see that approaching this intersection, there's a lane for left turn and a lane for right turn on Bon Air to Magnolia. That's the same as there was there before. The only difference will be before they would have been stopping at the yield in the slip lane, whereas now they'll be stopping at the signal. But they're still allowed to make a right turn on a red light there. So the westbound slip lane doesn't have any advantage to it. And so as we look back at the disadvantage of the slip lanes or the advantage of no slip lanes, so if we take the slip lanes away and we put the enlarged islands in here that were in the adopted plans, you can see now if a pedestrian wanted to continue walking on the east side of Magnolia, north to south or vice versa, they now have one crosswalk across Bon Air, and that's signalized, so there's a walking person and a hand for that crossing. When they leave the sidewalk and go onto the island, they do cross a bike lane, but it's not a vehicle lane. And as I'll show you in a minute, the bikes are not looking to merge with anybody, so the only conflict there is a bike looking straight forward with a pedestrian. And so this cuts down the vehicle versus pedestrian conflict area to that one crossing that is signalized. So what I want to highlight in this next is the difference between that ped crossing with a slip lane and not a slip lane. So again, the yellow arrow here shows a vehicle approaching the slip lane that would be looking to make a free right turn. So if they're looking to make that free right turn, and as I mentioned, most of the vehicles here are not proceeding straight because they don't want to be in that right turn lane to go to the medical facility. They want to be in the inside lane so they can proceed straight on Bon Air. And so as the drivers are approaching this slip lane, they are looking to their left to see if there's oncoming traffic turning left from southbound Magnolia. That's the direction that a driver, as they first get to that slip lane, is looking to. Is there a driver that I'm going to conflict with as I make this right turn? Secondarily, they're looking in front of them, and that's where a pedestrian would be crossing. And so as they approach the slip lane, they're looking in two different directions, one for oncoming vehicles and one for potential conflicting pedestrians in this crosswalk. So that's the sight triangle that a driver approaching a slip lane would have to negotiate, all the way to the left for an approaching vehicle and then all the way to the right to cover the crosswalk that's in front of them. With the adopted plan and the elimination of the slip lane, now a driver who's approaching the intersection and wanting to make that right turn has no conflict with vehicles. When they get the green light, there will be no left turning traffic coming in front of them. They will be looking ahead and to their right where they're going to be turning into, and that's the area where they would also be looking for pedestrians. So it cuts down on their field of vision. They're not looking in two different places for pedestrians and vehicles. And so there's just a comparison of the two side triangles that a driver approaching that intersection, both with and without the slip lanes, will be looking at. I can show a similar situation for coming off of Bon Air onto Magnolia. Again, on the left, you've got the sight line to an approaching vehicle. Again, the driver's looking to their left for a vehicle, then they're turning around and looking straight ahead, and that's where they would see a pedestrian conflicting. Whereas without the slip lane, the driver is looking towards in front where the pedestrian would be. That's where they're driving. So again, both the approved plans and the revision that we're asking for you to approve tonight include the elimination of slip lanes. And so we provided these slides to give some background on the slip lanes based on the questions that we received when we last brought this to council, to give some of the history on why the project proposal includes the elimination of those slip lanes. And again, it's an increase in pedestrian safety at this intersection. And overall, our analysis shows it's less than a 2-second delay at the intersection for that change. There are a lot of examples. One on the left here shows a before and after. The one on the right shows pretty close to what we will have, where it has the bike lane slipping behind the island. There is a lot of literature and guidance out there on intersection treatment, especially in areas with heavy pedestrian traffic. The one on the left is actually from Hawaii, but it's very similar to a lot of state agencies that are putting out guidance on how to accommodate pedestrians at intersections. And this basically is 4 sketches that go from best to worst. And the recommended one that I have highlighted here in red is to not have the slip lane. And then on the right, just that this is also has been done here, this is not the first time, Doherty and Magnolia used to have a slip lane for coming off Doherty and getting onto Magnolia. There's a before and after there. I think that before is just from about 2008. And there it is today. This one doesn't actually have the bike lane going behind it. It just has a gutter for drainage, but it's similar. And then the other thing, again, I just wanted to touch on, this is not a plan change, but just some clarification, because we've been talking about the 2 lanes northbound and then how the 2 lanes southbound end just before the intersection. And one of the reasons for that is to improve the safety. The traffic studies show that the northbound is the predominant traffic direction for peak analysis. And so one of the reasons that we're proposing to eliminate the second through lane at the intersection is it brings that left turn lane closer to the curb. It allows better maneuverability for that U-turn. And so the way the U-turn is now, I think you see a sign at the median that says no U-turns other than passenger cars. And so pulling this U-turn out into where that other through travel lane is today allows a much better, easier U-turn movement there. And then one of the things that does is if you've been behind somebody who's making that U-turn, they have to almost come to a stop to negotiate it, and that slows the left turn and minimizes the amount of left turn traffic that can get through that intersection. And so with this, giving more room for that U-turn, it lets more left turn cars through that intersection. The other thing it does, it eliminates that merge downstream where you've got 2 cars at a green light and then immediately downstream of the signal, they have to figure out who's going to go first. So this eliminates that condition also. And there's just kind of hard to see, but in blue and dashed is what the old U-turn configuration was, and this is just showing that you've got a better arc and more room, and you can more efficiently make that U-turn movement with that left turn lane pulled over. So again, the proposed revised plan tonight, this is the background, that's the adopted plan. The revision that we're asking you to adopt tonight adds these through movements here and then eliminates the bike buffer. It doesn't eliminate the bike lanes. We'll still have bike lanes, but we do lose that buffer when we add the through movement to that area. And then just briefly, these are the same exhibits that we provided before. These are my hand sketches that kind of show the corridor and how all the lane assignments were, and just to kind of show how we've evolved. This was the before condition with an arrow for each through lane. So this shows that the corridor basically between Bon Air and Dartmouth has 2 lanes, 2 through lanes in each direction. North and south of that, you only have 1 lane, but we did have 2-lane approaches to both of the Dartmouth and the Bon Air intersections. And then this is again the same sketch with the red added to it that we presented back in 2016 that showed what we proposed to do. to marry the Bon Air Bridge project with the mitigation project. So this included widening, you see the red median in the middle of Magnolia there, widening that median, lost as a through lane in each direction. And so the next evolution of that is what we're asking for tonight. So I've taken the red and I've put some blue on top of it to show what we're proposing to undo. And so essentially we're going to lose that median widening. We're going to go back to 2 lanes between Bon Air and Dartmouth. And then we're going to change that, what was going to be a dedicated right turn lane northbound to a shared through and right. I think this is the last slide, so this just kind of wraps up what the request is tonight for council. We're asking that you approve a revision to the adopted plans to allow that, the restriping of that intersection. Again, the change is just striping. We're not proposing to move any curbs or anything like that. This revision only requires restriping. But it is a lane assignment change, and so we're bringing that back for your approval tonight. And I'm available for any questions, and also with me tonight is David Parisi, who worked on one of the traffic studies and also is a traffic engineer for the bridge project.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to draw the council and public's attention. There was late mail, a letter from the Marin County Bicycle Coalitions on the dais regarding this item.
Are there any questions of the Public Works Director after that bludgeoning by PowerPoint? Councilmember Chu.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. What would you estimate the distribution of traffic is going northbound Magnolia as you approach Bon Air in terms of people going towards Greenbrae or straight towards Kentfield?
Based on the traffic counts we have, it's about 60 northbound going through to 40% making the right turn.
Okay, so in your assessment, you feel that rather than having a right turn from the right lane, that making, because the one circumstance that you didn't mention here is that when people are coming from Bon Air onto Magnolia westbound, there's actually no impediment to going right.
So,
See, it's a 3-way light. So the third cycle is when people are coming from Greenbrae on Bon Air and going through the intersection, which means anyone going north but wanting to go over the bridge could do so unimpeded.
so you're talking about an overlap where, say, if Bon Air has the green and that traffic is going, you're talking about if somebody was making the right northbound, then they would be able to go under the old proposal, but under the new proposal, they maybe wouldn't if they were stuck behind a car that's going straight.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I can't speak to the specifics of the traffic study. I don't know if David wants to provide information on all the scenarios that are run through a model and whether that's taken into account or not. Okay. If
Wherever it's going to
Well,
take the
he
least time.
needs the microphone.
Point out things too, that helps.
Sure. So the right turn during the evening peak is about 400 cars, and the through movement during that hour is about 700 vehicles. So what will happen is most of the through vehicles will be in this lane. In the past, that right turn lane was pretty short. It accommodated 4 or 5 cars. That will still be there, and that'll be able to accommodate all the right turns. Plus, if some people want to be in the through, go through on Magnolia, they'll be able to continue to do that. The overall delay, as Julian mentioned, compared to the pre-existing conditions of a year ago, will be an added 2 seconds of delay during that PM peak period.
Unless northbound, unless Magnolia's clogged, then everything's clogged.
That's correct. Yeah.
Because you have no relief from people blocking
Yeah.
Bon Air.
And what we observed though in the past, if in those conditions when Magnolia may have been clogged up, if there was through traffic in this lane that extended a few cars back, that would even have blocked the right turns at that point in time as well. So.
Well, the slip lane wouldn't have been.
What's the new queuing distance now? Because I notice it's also shorter between going from the one lane to two.
This would be, this is actually, do you see the curve right here? This is the same curve that exists today. So the queuing distance goes to exactly the same point.
Okay, maybe it just feels shorter with all the cones out there now.
Well, yeah, right now today it's much different than it was a year ago and then what it would be a few years from now.
Okay. I guess if it were closer to 50-50, then we could probably evaluate whether that right lane should remain a free right under the one circumstance when people from Bon Air are going straight through.
I really understand what they're doing, and I really wanted to fight for that slip lane for a long time. But I understand the priorities here.
I'm not
It will result in an earlier time during the day that people avoid this area, though. Because in the afternoon, people just don't go that way. Everybody down south of Doherty and south avoid this area after 3 p.m. Now, it'll probably be a little earlier.
Yeah, my question is not about the slip lane. It's just about whether it would be right turn only from the right lane, the benefit of that versus right turn or straight. Because if your traffic were more balanced in the two directions, it might change the dynamics of the intersection on that one light cycle.
Yeah, I think you're right. If the right turns were pretty, like a 700, similar to the through movements.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the council? Catherine?
So, since you're up there, and there's a few for Julian too, but I'd like to continue on that same topic. There are a lot of people who ride their bikes on the north side of the street, on the Corbett side of the street, in the opposite direction. So they're coming southbound, but they're on that side of the road. And it's mostly kids. It's me. I do it all the time. But it's a lot of kids who are on their way to school on that side of the street, and they don't come on the other side of Magnolia. Yes, they're coming along there. They hop over that intersection, and then they go onto the bike path a little further down. Explain then with the pork chop where the transit would be. Where's the travel lane for bicyclists now coming southbound?
Well, there will be a bike lane. There'll be bike lanes in both directions on Magnolia, north of Bon Air. If kids and others, if we can get them to ride in the correct area on Magnolia, southbound here, they would just cross into one lane instead of 2 lanes to make a left turn, ideally, and to cross, and then they can usually get onto the bike path in that method. If they are riding in the opposite direction, as Julian mentioned before, under this plan, the buffered bike lane would no longer be there.
Right.
It's been striped in, so it would just be a standard bike lane with a 6-inch wide stripe separating cyclists from the 2 lanes of northbound traffic. If they were riding in the street or on the sidewalk, this would be the area where they would cross. They'd cross ideally, with the single crosswalk instead of 3 crosswalks onto the path.
And now they hop perhaps onto that triangular area to wait. Now they would be waiting on the oval, not oval shape, but sort of a semi-half moon shaped pork chop. Slip lane barrier. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because these curb returns are exactly like they've always been. There'd be some modification with their elevation. But the pork chop islands, as they're referred to in our terminology, would be enlarged under this concept. So they would actually be able to store more pedestrians and bicyclists within those areas, and they could make their transitions through those.
And in your work and in the literature, because there is some science that's been presented here, there about collisions and bicycle safety, what would the elimination of that buffer lane in the North Magnolia area do to affect bicycle safety?
That's a good question that I actually don't know the answer to. I do know that bicyclists do feel safer, and you will see increased volumes because they feel safer if there's a buffered lane compared to if there's just a white stripe. But I don't know if there's been enough research yet to talk about really the safety implications on a linear street.
Have we collected data on that since the switch over in the last 2 years to making it a single lane with a wider bike lane and a buffer lane? Have we seen any changes in bicycle or and vehicle interaction there?
Not that I'm aware of.
We haven't done any counts.
We haven't done any counts on it?
But I do know in Mill Valley, the Miller Avenue project, which converted the traffic, most of Miller Avenue to buffer bike lanes with 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. In some places with 1 lane of traffic, but it has buffer bike lanes for 2 miles in each direction. Has seen a huge increase
In ridership?
in ridership and of all ages.
Yeah.
Other council member questions?
For now, on that particular section, but I have things for Julian, too.
I do too, but why don't you go ahead? Go ahead and,
Start with Julian?
yeah, go ahead.
So
It's your turn.
So it looks like we have probably 3 subject matters. We have the bridge update and if there's questions on the bridge work. And then I have a few about the northbound Magnolia lanes changing from 2 to 1 back to 2. And then it looks like the third topic is the reconfiguration of that intersection from the pork chops to the slip lanes to the pork chops. Am I correct with that? About those 3 things? But just to begin with, the resolution doesn't say that, so I'm just not sure where we fit in that. But the resolution only indicates the bike lanes, unless I'm incorrect in that.
So the resolution, so the actual plan change that you're looking at is depicted by the orange arrows here. So the plan you already adopted before we went out to bid, the configuration of this intersection that eliminated the slip lanes, and that only accommodated 1 lane in each direction of Magnolia. And so with your previous direction to restore the north section of Magnolia to 2 lanes, the request tonight for the plan change is to revise this section of the bridge plans to accommodate the 2 lanes.
I got it.
Northbound. The information on the slip lane is being provided based on questions that were asked at the last time we had a public workshop. There's no proposal
Got it.
in the resolution to change the slip lanes.
Got it, great. So I'm still unclear, what happens to that mitigation that we had resolved, the 5-point mitigation with the widening of the drainage area on North Magnolia? And maybe I just missed that in the things. Where are we picking up that mitigation somewhere else?
So the current plan, and we're working on revising those plans as we speak, is to increase the underground storage, the infiltration pipes that are under the greenway. Basically to add a couple of pipes to compensate for the not removing those lanes. So that's where that's at. It's still being designed and plan checked. And then that will be going back to the resource agencies probably first of next year. And then we'll be coming back to the council in the spring of next year, most likely to approve those plan changes for the mitigation project.
So do we have a plan B if they don't approve that change in the mitigation? Because they've already approved the reduction of pavement in the North Magnolia area. If we now put pavement back on and they say, no, that's, the resource agencies don't approve the secondary plan, then we take it back off again? Are we jumping ahead before our permissions?
We don't have a plan B yet, based on the fact that they approved the underground infiltration for part of the mitigation. And we had preliminary conversations with them. That's the direction we're proceeding in. They could always come back and say they don't like that and ask us to pick something else. There could be a plan B, C, or D. I don't know that yet.
That just gets me a little concerned, because if we take the pavement, we took the pavement off, now if we add it back on and we don't get the approvals, then we have to take it back off, or we have to go somewhere else, and I'm not sure where the somewhere else is yet.
I just want to remind Councilmember Way and the council that that was put into evidence for your consideration when you gave us the direction. So I think in fairness to the public, you gave us that direction with that fact known.
Right, and just, if my recollection is correct, I was the only one who voted not to do it, so I'm trying to remain consistent because my feelings about what this change is for the safety of the covered bike lane has not changed. So I'm trying to be consistent and trying to see if that, my understanding of it has changed over the course of the last 2 years. So, all right, that's it for now, but I just still struggling with this, how I'm going to reconcile it.
Councilmember Haroff, and then Councilmember Chu has a clarification that he wants to discuss.
I just, reading the MCBC letter and just wanted to put this on the record since it's already been included. It's just the first sentence says, the MCBC is disappointed to see staff recommendation to abandon safety improvements adopted by the Larkspur Council in 2016. I don't think staff recommendation is suggesting any abandonment of the idea to, well, now I'm going to have a double negative. We're not putting the slip lane back. That's not your recommendation.
The staff recommendation is not changing the slip lanes from the adopted design, which was eliminating the slip lanes,
Yeah,
correct?
that's correct.
Yes.
So their assumption in terms of what they were looking at is incorrect.
I don't know, I read the letter and I had the same question. I wasn't sure if they misunderstood, because we included a discussion of slip lanes in the document, if they thought that we were recommending, but that's not the way the resolution is written, correct?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I had the same impression. Councilmember Haroff.
Yeah, and I want to thank Councilmember Chu for bringing that issue up, because I think it's unfortunate when we get letters that raise questions about what we're doing that are not necessarily accurate, because we're not touching any of that stuff at all. I just had a couple of questions. First, for Julian, going back to your description of what's going on with the bridge, I got a question from a member of the public earlier today about the temporary bridge, the trestle that's gone in, and apparently there's some rumor that may be circulating that temporary bridge structure is gone in too low and may have to be raised or adjusted in some way. I had not heard that, and I just wanted to bring that up and confirm with you that there's nothing to that.
No, in fact, we had to get a permit from Marin County Flood Control where they analyzed the creek flow with the trestle in before we could put the trestle in. And so they analyzed the trestle for flow to make sure that it wasn't going to impede the 100-year flow. And in fact, they modeled with both trestles in and the existing bridge to take the worst of the worst condition.
Okay, that's very helpful, and what I expected, that apparently that rumor was being circulated in connection with the meeting at the Board of Supervisors yesterday on the approval of the San Anselmo flood risk reduction project. So I'd not heard of that. I just wanted to confirm that there's nothing to it. So thank you for that. I don't care which of you. I just still have a couple. Well, one kind of general question. I kind of like Mayor Hilmer at one point before was not enthusiastic about the removal of slip lanes. I'm kind of convinced, particularly in the context of this intersection, that it's appropriate for public safety reasons. Again, I go through this intersection all the time, and there's an awful lot of pedestrian and bicycle traffic that is going through there in conflict with vehicular traffic, and it's a challenge. And anything we can do to reduce that, I think we ought to positively consider. And I get it, particularly with the pedestrian, but just kind of following on Councilmember Way's concerns, just to make sure we're not detracting from anything that we've done and approved in the past to, preserve and enhance the safety of bicycle riders in this area. It would seem to me that the benefits that we're getting for pedestrians would also inure to the benefit of bike riders.
Yeah, I think it's a very balanced design. I'd say the only differences for the cyclists would be in the northbound direction. Before, in the previous design, the right slip lane, drivers would cross a dashed bike lane. between this point and this spot. And now, instead of, and there was that conflict, right, of 400 cars an hour crossing the bike lane. Under the revised design, the bike lane will be on the right side here. And so when the light does turn green, motorists turning right are required to yield to the through cyclists to the right of them. There's a potential slight increase for conflict there, but that has to be weighed against the conflict that would have occurred over here.
Okay.
And the other change is, instead of a buffer bike lane up to Dartmouth, it would just be a single, white line. That's the other difference, to provide 2 traffic lanes. There's not enough room to do 2 traffic lanes plus a buffer bike lane.
Yeah, no, I understand
Yeah,
that.
so those are the only bike differences.
Yeah, and I suppose in an ideal world, it would be nice to have plenty of space to put in that buffer bike lane,
Yeah,
but
but
we
there's
have,
not
to work with the physical constraints
Exactly.
that we've got
Yeah.
with this project. So just again, kind of from my own personal edification, I'm still a little confused about on the impact on level of service for traffic flowing across the bridge and then turning left onto Magnolia. Is there an impact there?
I can look at my cheat sheet, because we did all the calculations. So that would be the westbound left turn, and there would be, during the PM peak hour, there is an increase in the delay for those vehicles by about 7 seconds.
Okay.
We can look at every single movement as well. So that would be from a level service B to a C condition.
Okay.
Which is interesting. Under the previous plan, by the way, when there was a separate lane, there could be a right turn arrow and this going at the same time. But under this scheme,
Right.
there can't be that, what's called an overlap. So there will be a slight increase in delay during the PM peak, a C service for that left
Okay.
turn.
So that's actually a fairly, of the different potential impacts that you're considering in connection with this, that's among the most significant, I would imagine.
Yeah, but I mean, for us, D's acceptable in the town, in
Yeah.
the city.
No, I just, relative to what the prior conditions would be. And again, that's
Sure.
a personal interest to me because I make that turn all the time,
Yeah,
every
sure.
day, at least 2 or 3 times a day.
Mhm.
But I understand what's going here, and I think it's the right direction to go. And I also just would make a comment relative to Mayor Hilmer's comment about the slip lane going from Magnolia onto the Bon Air. When traffic is deadlocked on Magnolia, it's backed up well before that intersection. So the fact that that slip lane's there doesn't do any good. You're still going to be stuck.
Right, that's correct. Because this has always been a very short little.
Yeah, it's
bulb.
just a little flip in there, and
Yeah.
it doesn't, if there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to go, and you can't get into that slip lane.
Correct,
So,
that's right.
okay, that's all I had.
All right. Just one short comment I'm going to slip in here, and that is the perception of delay. The numerical assignment of what that delay is amplified many times in the perception of that delay. So a 7-second delay is perceived. The actual experience of that is much greater than the perception of it, I'm just saying, is amplified. So to me, that's a significant statement. 2-second delay is amplified. These, for those of us that live and reside here, we know at what point during the day we avoid going in a particular direction, having to do with entire districts of the city. So, and this has to do also with an understanding of what ways out exist at times of the day. So gridlock, say during the holiday Christmas season, we know the ways out, whether it's morning or afternoon. And we're getting to points in the surface street system where that condition is existing beyond the holidays into like half of the school, then it's the school year, and then it's all year. So these things mean a lot to us. I'm just saying, changes like this are dramatic for us in terms of how our mobility through the typical day.
I understand that. I will add one thing. In the pre-existing conditions, this intersection operated okay, but the equipment is so old. The detectors in the pavement have failed many, many times. And so the signal just really never operated. It still doesn't operate very well. Under the Bon Air Bridge project, which will include these modifications, it'll have all state-of-the-art equipment, including video detection. Up high, you see those white cameras. They're not looking at your face. They're looking at your car, and they're adjusting the signal timing. So during the course of this project, after things are installed, it's going to be much, much easier to make adjustments and have the timing work better, hopefully even reduce those delays. Mr. Mayor, so that'll be something I'm sure the city.
Plus
is
the
very interested
hospital.
in. Yeah.
So, all right, other council member
just-
questions?
yeah,
Vice Mayor
it's a
Morrison.
crazy time at the moment. Let's see, Councilman Harv, thank you for mentioning the trestles. I've also had that, those questions. And actually, to my eyes, it looks quite low also. So that's nice to know that it's safe as we all hope. That really bums me out about hearing about the 7 seconds and it becoming a B to a C. So is there anything that we can do differently on that side?
Well, again, these are our preliminary calculations. The levers can be pulled, to change the green time from one approach to another approach, and there'll be refinements made in real time. Once
To
the
bring it back
project's-
up to a B?
Possibly,
Okay.
possibly. And again, we were, with the new equipment and the new video type of detections, we can get much better performance than we've been seeing in the past.
Can you guarantee that?
I can't guarantee what's going to happen to the traffic volume, so,
Of course not.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I guess at this point in the presentation, we encourage all community members to reduce their vehicle miles traveled. And for trips where
Absolutely.
you don't need your car, ride your bike, walk, or share.
I met with Julian this afternoon, so he already
Councilmember Harf.
answered my questions.
Just one follow-up observation, again, as a frequent user of this intersection. I understand what you're saying about the signaling not working well right now, because it's not. There's often a very lengthy backup on Bon Air when there's nothing happening because we're stuck at a signal. So I'm a firm believer that many of these problems can be addressed pretty effectively through technology, and I'm encouraged to hear that that's part of the plan.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that with the construction that's going on now and has been going on over the past year, not only have some of the detectors, those are those loops you see in the ground, they're going to be replaced with video, which are going to be much more reliable. Not only have those not been working, or they've been sporadic, but there's been a need to actually put this on what's called pre-time signal phasing. So it's not even car responsive, it's just based on a clock, based on the best traffic patterns that we know, which is very inefficient. So that'll all improve with the new detection that will be provided with the project.
Councilmember Way has one more question.
One more question at this point until we hear from the public. Back to that buffer bike lane, because I still am focused on that. What is the science about putting in those white cone pillars to separate vehicles from a bike lane if you don't have the wide buffer like we have right now? Does that enhance safety?
I think it makes drivers more aware.
Of the
We've
bike.
seen that on several projects. The only problem is, that they get demolished pretty quick, and you have to replace them. But that's a possibility.
Well, we've added some, if I'm correct, we've added some as you exit the freeway going eastbound on Sir Francis Drake. I think we've added some in there. Can't recall right now. But would that be a recommendation? Or are you willing to make a recommendation without?
As a bike rider, I don't like getting.
Well, I'm interested in what the evidence shows about whether that actually improves safety if you don't have a dedicated bike lane.
Well, I think what maybe we could look at would be what is the remaining curb-to-curb width, and if there's availability to get a wider white stripe in, or even a really narrow buffer. We could look at some options with 2 traffic lanes and a bike lane and see if there's any room to do either those what are called safe hit posts, or a wider area between the bike lane and the traffic lane. Maybe it can't be 3 feet or 4 feet, but maybe we can get a 1.5 foot buffer.
And your comment that they get hit and demolished sometimes, is that that sort of indicates to me that if there was a cyclist there, they would have been hit and demolished. But that's just an elaboration. But we need to factor in the cost of replacement. And with the cost of replacement, what is the general sort of cost of replacements of those, or do we know?
I don't know. I'd have to ask the county. They have some in on El Monte Boulevard and some other locations, and they're frequently replacing those. But I think they do provide more awareness for the
A
drivers.
visual, right. Okay,
Sure.
thank you.
Other council member questions? This is a business item, but we'll take public comment. Are there members of the public that would like to ask questions or make comments on this item? Don't rush.
Dwayne Price, Elm Avenue. First of all, consider rumble strips. They're very effective to keeping cars in their lane. Another thing, I would like to correct a comment or some words that both Julian and Dave used. There's only one bike lane there. There are not two bike lanes. So using the plural is not appropriate. There is no bike lane going southbound on Magnolia at this point. And given the proposed changes, there is no way that you can put one in. So given that, what I see here is that we have gone back to a very dangerous and basically an unnecessary situation with those 4 lanes. And now there's even a consideration to going to a very dangerous and unnecessary free right turn lane. Hopefully you won't do that. Now, so what we've done, what we're doing here, what we have done and what the slip lane thing could do, by the way, is we are telling the world that the only thing that we care about are these isolating steel and plastic cages that run down our roads. Everybody else, hey, you know, you're just going to take care of yourself. We'll try to help you around, help you here and there to get around, but our priority are those steel cages. And guess what? If we do that, and if that is the perception, we're going to get more of them. Yeah, which is what has happened. In the 41 years I've lived here in Larkspur, the traffic situation has just gone crazy. In the 41 years I've lived here in Larkspur, the population has gone up maybe 10%. And that's mostly because stuff over there on the side of the freeway. So is that really, honestly, the message that we want to send to the world? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Other members of the public that would like to make comments on this agenda item? Please step forward. Going. Everybody kind of playing to be the last one. Come on. Quit playing around. Step up here. 1, 2.
James Holmes, my concern is the removal of the slip lanes. I'd like to ask a question, though, and then make some comments. My question is, was there any discussion with the hospital to see if the hospital had any concerns about possible slowing of the ambulances as a result of the removal of the slip lanes?
Question to staff.
The hospital is not the appropriate entity to talk to about ambulances. Chief Schertz is present. We spoke with him. He's actually a representative of the RVPA, the Paramedic Authority, which is the appropriate entity. You could certainly call on him if you'd like after the public speaks.
One of the key considerations of retaining the slip lane at Madrone Avenue was the access of fire trucks and not having them impeded. So that that would be a concern for me if traffic is tied up. But the bottom line is if the slip lines are removed, then cars turning right off Magnolia to Bon Air and off Bon Air onto Magnolia will need to stop at stoplights, which they don't need to do now, And this will increase the traffic congestion, especially on Bon Air where there's only one through lane, not two. This will increase congestion. It will drop the level of service. It will be much worse than anticipated because it always seems that traffic is much worse than anticipated. There is so much of a problem with congestion here that I think the council should take deliberate actions which increase congestion only in the most compelling circumstances, and I don't think they exist here. The traffic report says that the benefit of the slip lane for people turning off Magnolia onto Bon Air is negated because those cars have to deal with cars turning from Magnolia onto Bon Air, and there's a need to merge onto a single lane. First, I'd say that if conditions after the turn slow traffic, then I'd say that's all the more reasons to avoid slowing it down before the turn. But in fact, and I have to say I've been using this intersection both as a pedestrian and as a motorist ever since it was put in the 70s, so 40-odd years experience. But in fact, the post-turn impediments are minimal because, first of all, you only have left turn traffic when the light is turning, when the light is allowing it, and that's only a small part of the time that the slip lane is used. And secondly, the trap lane is very long and the visibility is very good, so that it is very easy to make a smooth maneuver, and that will be taken away as a result of this proposal. It's claimed that eliminating the slip lane will increase pedestrian safety, or at least make pedestrians feel safer. However, from a pedestrian standpoint, the good thing about slip lanes is that unlike a regular four-way intersection, you never have to look three ways, both ways and then in back of your shoulder. At the slip lane, you just look one way to your left. Then when you get to the main street, then you only have to look right and left. You don't have to look over your shoulder. And this makes the slip lanes actually much safer if you think about it. And of course, you use common sense and you don't step right into the path of a car. There is an additional concern that is being created here because there is going to be a bike lane, and that's going to exist, and actually that's a little bit more dangerous because bikes are less visible and less careful, than the vehicles. So I think that having this bike lane back, people will not see the bikes coming, and you have more problems. With respect to the statements by MCBC, in this letter, I don't know if they've been verified, but what occurs to me is how fault was determined, and is there any indication that the accidents would have been avoided in the absence of the slip lane? So I don't really think that many conclusions can be drawn from that. And to wind up, from a financial standpoint, I think it's very discouraging for people when they see functional intersections being drilled out and concrete being taken away, and what people really want to see is streets repaired rather than concrete demolition. For some reason, the current fashion among traffic professionals is for more squared-off urban-style intersections, just like the current fashion in housing architecture is for squared-off industrial-sized modern. But fashions change. I don't think Larkspur should follow fashions. We should certainly seek to make improvements, but we should also stick with what works and with what is pleasing in both form and function. So I would say, please do keep the slip lanes and maintain our traffic levels and our perception of service. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Other members of the public that would like to make comments on this agenda item? Hi.
Hi.
Can you tell us your name?
Arthur Saftless. I live in Larkspur, and I know I'm very familiar with this intersection. I came here to talk about 5G. I don't know if I'll have a chance to talk about that for a couple of minutes later, but I will comment on what I've heard
Please
about
comment
the
on
slip
this
lane.
item.
On this item, the slip lanes, I've used them, and and I haven't heard anything that makes any sense to me why you would want to eliminate them. I mean, they're much more convenient.
Thank you for your comments. Other members of the public that would like to comment on this item? How many more speakers do we have on this item? All right, ma'am, you'll be the last one.
Thank you, Cindy Winter. My friend James doesn't know anything about cycling, or he would not have commented as he had.
Make your comments to us, though, on this item, I'm
I
sure.
shall, yes. I used that slip lane as a cyclist. I used to. It's narrow, and when a car comes up aside of me to use that slip lane too, I feel squeezed, and some of the vehicles are so large now that there's really not room for two of us. So I never use those slip lanes anymore. I go around to the parking lot in back of Corbett's. And I wanted to tell David Parisi that in, I think, 2016, I spent a lot of time on the front porch of Corbett's watching to see the cyclists and pedestrians, how many were there. There are a lot going along Magnolia. I think some are going to and from Kenfield schools, and some are going to the Larkspur public schools. There were many small children on bikes with their mommy or their daddy. I share my friend Dwayne's feelings in that there is a lot of discussion here about traffic and a few seconds delay, and there are other issues. Larkspur has a complete streets resolution number 0215, signed by Mayor Chu on January 7th, 2015. The resolution says on page 2, finding 3, the proposed general plan amendments are intended to provide a comprehensive integrated transportation network with infrastructure and design that allows safe and convenient travel along and across streets for all street users in the city of Larkspur. All this discussion about traffic convenience ignores pedestrians and cyclists, and I think a few seconds delay in order to keep our kids safe and our adults safe and encourage them to cycling, it doesn't matter that much for convenience. And I'm also surprised that there's been no discussion of our DPW director's comments on agenda item 8.1, page 3, that the slip lanes now do not meet ADA standards. They do not conform to current traffic engineering design principles and standards. Their elimination allows for pedestrian and bicycle intersection improvements. And if you want to keep the slip lanes, somebody has to design them to ADA standards and to make them safe for cyclists and pedestrians. And I think the expense of putting in new signal lights just for bicycles and pedestrians and the ADA or whatever that he alludes to, I see an expenditure of taxpayer money that is probably not warranted. And so I think that he has a plan to eliminate the slip lanes. I think that's a good idea, and make those crossings much safer for pedestrians, ADA, and cyclists. The plan would not unduly inconvenience motorists. Therefore, let the city proceed with this plan as expeditiously as possible in conformance with the complete streets resolution.
Wow, that's perfect, 3 minutes. Good job.
I've had training.
Good job. Thank you for your comments. All right, we're going to bring it back to the council for discussion. We have a proposed plan revision and a requested council action, which is to approve the revised plan for the Magnolia Avenue Bonaire Road intersection. Who would like to start the discussion? Catherine, would you like to start the discussion?
No,
Go ahead.
All right, I'll make my argument. Maybe I'll convince my other council members on this dais what my position is. So I recall, Julian, when you first arrived and we had made these changes, and it was a very contentious position. So we had a lot of people in the audience who expressed opinions about the lack of that 600, I think it's 600 feet going from 2 lanes to 1. So we talked it through. We had an additional traffic safety study. We committed to that. But I recall, and I should have watched the video again, that one of the concerns and considerations we had was that we had 2 major projects going on with the revision of the hospital and the Bon Air Bridge project. And we didn't know I felt, we didn't know what the impact those 2 major projects were going to have in this area, because they hadn't started and they weren't completed yet. And I thought, and I think I argued at the time, that we need to wait and keep the configuration as we had accepted it to be 1, even with the increase to 9.2 second or something delay and the disgruntledness of some of the some of the community members in that area, particularly who live north of the Skylark apartment and into the Murray Park area. But I felt at the time that we hadn't yet seen the full effect of that intersection from the changes that have now been indicated to be changes in the bicycle flow, changes in the traffic light flow, and changes in what may be configurations of turning in that area once the Bon Air Bridge is done. I was also not convinced that we were being showing concern for the traffic of the pedestrians and bicyclists who are coming on that section of Magnolia, and there are a lot of children who go on that side of the road, although ideally they should be on the other side of the road, but they usually aren't. That I felt at the time that need to have an additional buffer lane was imperative until we came up with another idea. So I still feel consistent with that, is that we still don't have the full understanding of what the traffic flows will be in there when the Bon Air Bridge is done. And I still I am concerned that we haven't had Plan B mitigation approved yet. This may be what we end up for, but at this point, I think it's too early for us to make those changes until those other 3 variables have been analyzed further. So that's where I stand on that.
Councilmember Hara?
I think we've kind of fleshed out the issues tonight. I'd support the staff recommendation.
Councilmember Chu?
It is one of those intersections where you're not going to get a perfect solution for all modes of travel. So I think we've done the best that we can where there have been compromises made in all different areas, and it's probably the best solution, so I support staff recommendation.
And
Vice Mayor
Cindy,
Morrison?
I want to say thank you that bringing up the house. The safety is very important about the ADA compliant too, so thank you for that. That should have been mentioned and discussed. I am also going to go for the staff recommendation.
I can count. Somebody like to make a motion?
I move to accept Resolution 7318.
Is there a second?
I'd second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
We have 1 opposed. 4-1.
So, Mr. Mayor, we are required to note that it was Councilmember Way who voted no.
All right. Any further discussion on this item? All right. That concludes our agenda this evening. But before we move to adjourn, I'm going to ask him. Sir? Hi. We've concluded our agenda this evening, and the only item we have left this evening is to adjourn the meeting. There was a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting to talk about items not on the agenda. Would you like to come back at a future meeting to talk about the 5G item, or I'll give you 3 minutes tonight if you like.
I would like 3 minutes if you can.
All right.
Do we need to do a motion to return to item 2?
Yeah, I was just at a meeting in Fairfax last week, and the public comments weren't until like 2.5 hours into the meeting.
I understand.
So yours is a little different, you know. Should I have this on, or is this on? Or?
It's on.
Okay, I don't know if,
Could you tell us your name again, please?
my name is Arthur Saftless. I've been a resident of Larkspur for probably 35 years.
Thank you very much.
The 5G thing, I've only become an activist in the last couple of weeks. I was at the Fairfax meeting, and there's been a lot of action on the issue with, maybe perhaps you read about it in the newspaper, with Mill Valley. May I assume you're against 5G? I am against, fervently, against 5G. Has this been raised at all here at all? Okay, so I'm the only one right now, because there's a lot of, there were 55 people at the Fairfax one, and God knows how many in Mill Valley. Mill Valley actually voted against what the FCC is trying to implement. And that is and I got this handout that I give to everybody. There's a lot of information on it. One of the things I might want to read actually is from the National Institute of Health. The National Institute of Health said, the industry and the FCC are pushing fast at both the state and federal level to put forth legislation to take away home rule in our local municipalities so that industry can install toxic 5G infrastructure before any more of the NTP study findings can be reported out. The FCC and industry are not concerned with public health. They've actually mandated in their last laws that you, as a body, to talk about the installations, cannot talk about health and safety. And to me, what I wrote in this thing, this should tell you enough. How they can mandate that we cannot talk about health and safety when there are thousands of scientific documents that talk about health and safety and how this thing is a real scourge that's coming. They're talking about putting, because 5G, first of all, is 100 times more powerful than 4G. Many people are having great difficulty living under 4G, and there's people getting sick all over the place. But what the difference between 4G and 5G is that, in my understanding of this, and I'm not an engineer. Okay, is that it's not going to be on individual big towers like we have now. Those towers will feed small towers, and the FCC wants to put one in front of your house and then another one 200 feet in front of the next house. There will be a small cell tower in front of your house. And they call it small, and there's a picture here of a woman, this came from the Santa Rosa newspaper, and they're talking about how small this is. There's a refrigerator-sized thing that's standing right next to her, plus all this stuff up in the air. And what I'm understanding is, because of the latest FCC mandates, there has to be some extraordinary kind of ordinances passed very soon if you don't want to be under the gun of the FCC. The FCC is full of only industry people. And I have ample copies to give you. So I guess my time is up. Can we put this on the next agenda?
You can contact me through the city website and make that request.
Through the city clerk person?
Sure.
Okay. So let me
And we'll talk about it with staff. Thank you very much for your comments. James, do you have,
Very quickly, James Holmes, Larkspur. I would just like to say I concur with the gentleman, and I think it would be worthwhile to consider this matter, and with an idea toward perhaps piggybacking on what Mill Valley is doing.
we'll do our best to learn what's going
One
on.
final thing, I don't know if anybody saw in the
We've closed public comment.
IJ about Earl J. O'Grady, the former mayor who passed away. Does anybody remember him? I think it may be only Joan and I who may remember him. But in any event, if it's his legacy was mixed, but I don't know if the council wants to, if they follow the
Well, if you would leave that with the city clerk and so she can take note of it, I'd like to learn more. Thank you.
I just know that sometimes the council adjourns in memory of these people, and without saying whether or not he merits that.
We'll do so. He certainly does if you've served as mayor. All right. Thank you, James. And thank you, sir. All right, a motion to adjourn in memory of Earl J. Grady.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Very good. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thanks for all your work to the staff. A lot of information presented tonight, and we value all your work. Thank you, Mr. Parisi, for your wise counsel.